Hi and welcome. Today I wanted to talk about how to create easy and effective relationships. Because when I talk to people about well-being, this topic comes up repeatedly. And here's the thing. Once we learn how the mind works and we begin to see how the human mind is designed, we see the inside out nature of how we create our life experience, and we see the wisdom in it, then we start to see ways of interacting with people that weren't available to us pretty much before having this understanding. And that's what brings ease and effectiveness to relationships. So it's a fact that we all live in our own separate reality, created by our thinking moment to moment. And there's nothing that any of us can do about it. It's just the way that it works. But when you understand this, you still live in a separate reality, but you can factor it in because you can recognize it and you know that it's true for you and for everybody else that you interact with. And when we see this, it kind of gives us a way to step back from it a little bit. And that can be really helpful because when we step back from it, we all have the capacity to see something new and different. And that's what tends to happen. Now, for the purposes of today's video, I've completely oversimplified this, so please forgive me. And I'm going to introduce three models of interacting with other people. And the first model is the conflict model. Now, each model has a person A and a person B. And I want you to imagine a circle around each person, A and B, just to kind of keep them in separate realities. And, just knowing that there's nothing we can do about the fact that we're in these separate realities. And we've all had a time when we looked at somebody and kind of, where the heck did I come up with that? And the other person will tell us, it's just obvious. It's obvious to them in their reality, but it's not obvious to us. And that's where relationships can actually become difficult. So, the conflict model, model A. This is where person A is telling the other person, person B, what their reality is, and vice versa. But when person A is speaking, person B is in their head defending their own reality and refuting what person A is saying, and vice versa. So we're not getting very far. There's very little listening going in. Person A and B are both very attached to their own point of view. They don't want to let in the point of view of the other person. It looks to them like their reality is right and the other person's reality is wrong. So very little progress gets made, as you can imagine. We see this playing out all over the place. The only time anything happens is if one person has power over the other. So if A gets the power, he can tell B what his reality is. There's going to get very little cooperation or collaboration from the other person. And for people that adopt this model of interacting with other people, their relationships tend to be fraught with problems and difficulties. So that's A. And that brings us on to model B. Now, model B is a bit more hopeful, and this is the compromise model. So this is where person A and person B seek the proverbial common ground. Um, so we might go in thinking we're looking for a win-win situation, but because compromise means I'm giving something up, and so is person B, then it can feel like lose-lose. Now, there is listening going on to a certain degree here. And, if somebody is really good at this, they can get a lot out of it because in this model, people listen in a very specific way. So, person A is listening for where person B is more or less passionate, more or less invested, and they're listening for where they can slip in the compromise. So, the skill here is negotiation, and it's a good skill and a very useful skill, and it can be used. But here's the problem: even though we're looking for win-win, it can feel like lose-lose. And there's also a tendency to keep score. So person B might say, well, I gave 60% the last time, so really to be fair and equalize things, you need to give a bit more this time. And when we start adding a concept of fairness into things, then we're adding a whole other layer of complexity. So that's model B. And that brings us to model C, which is the discovery model. Now, when we understand the nature of our mind and how things work, and that we're all in separate realities, and we factor that in, then that allows us to kind of just take a little step back or a step aside from our own personal reality, just for a bit. We'll go right back to it later. Now, this happens naturally when we travel to other countries with different cultures. we tend to take our own culture off our mind and we embrace whatever's going on around us. We're curious, we're interested. We learn all about the food and the music and what they do for entertainment and so on and so forth. Now, that doesn't mean that, we adopt that way of living and when we go home, we take all the habits and the behaviors of the other culture with us. But what it does mean is that while we're there, we can drop our thinking about our own culture and we can embrace and appreciate and enjoy the new culture. And we learn something new because we let something new in. Now, this is one of the reasons that we love to travel, of course, but in terms of our relationships with other people, when we have person A and person B, if person A is that curious and that interested and willing to embrace and learn and understand person B's reality and how that makes sense for them and what their logic is in terms of how it makes sense for them, then something magical can happen. Because when person A is that interested and that curious, then they're listening at a very deep level. And they're listening to understand and they're listening to learn. And person B will pick this up and know that what they're saying is being taken in by the other person and being taken on board by the other person. And what happens then is that person B can have a tendency to pop up out of their own personal reality for a few moments. And then both A and person B are now navigating a whole new territory. And what happens in that territory is, as we let more information in, there's more learning, there's more understanding, and with that comes new ideas about how to interact with each other. And that's why we call this one the discovery model, because with discovery and learning comes new insights. And every single human being on the planet has the capacity to listen deeply, to listen for understanding, and we all have the capacity to have new ideas about how to interact with each other. So I'm recommending the discovery model. So the opportunity today is to really have a look and see, how the discovery model can really lead us to win-win situations that feel like win-win situations, and that can make our relationships easier, more effective, and more graceful. That's it, people. I'll be back next time. In the meantime, take care.